Bitter almonds.
Finally, something decent around here.
She did it! She's been trying to get rid of him for months.
I never thought I'd watch my husband die from the coffee meant for me. His body hit the kitchen floor 40 minutes after he drank from my cup. The sound still echoes in my head, like a sack of cement dropping. His eyes rolled back, foam bubbling at the corners of his mouth. My mother-in-law screamed, but it sounded far away, like I was underwater. The paramedics crashed through our front door 8 minutes later, but those 8 minutes felt like 8 years. They pumped his chest, shoved tubes down his throat. And the whole time, I stood there thinking one terrible thought: I did this. I switched our cups. The detective's voice cut through my shock. "Ma'am, who prepared the coffee this morning?" My mother-in-law's finger shot up like a weapon, pointing straight at me. "She did. She's been trying to get rid of him for months." That's when I knew I was either going to prison or a grave. Because nobody would believe the truth, that the poison was meant for me, and I'd just been smart enough not to drink it. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Let me take you back 6 hours. That morning started like every other morning in hell. I woke up to my husband Trevor yelling about his shirt not being ironed. His mother Patricia stood in our bedroom doorway with that smile she always wore, the one that never reached her eyes. She'd been living with us for 3 months, ever since she claimed her apartment building had mold issues. 3 months of her criticizing everything I did. 3 months of her whispering poison in Trevor's ear about how I wasn't good enough, wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't woman enough. "Let me make you both coffee," Patricia said sweetly. Too sweetly. "You look tired, dear." I followed her to the kitchen, watching her hands move over the coffee maker. She hummed while she worked, pulling out my favorite mug, the blue one with chips on the rim. She poured the dark liquid carefully, then slid it across the counter to me. Steam rose from it, curling in the morning light. And that's when I smelled it. Bitter almonds. My grandmother used to make almond cookies when I was little. This wasn't that warm, sweet smell. This was sharp. Chemical. Wrong. I'd read enough mystery novels to know what bitter almonds meant. I froze, my hand halfway to the cup. Patricia was watching me. Waiting. Trevor stomped into the kitchen, still complaining. Why is breakfast never ready on time? My mother never had these problems when Dad was alive. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. While Trevor grabbed his phone, while Patricia turned to the refrigerator, I switched our cups. My chipped blue mug slid in front of him. His plain white one sat in front of me. My heart hammered so loud I thought they'd hear it. Trevor grabbed the blue mug without looking and took 3 long gulps. "Finally, something decent around here," he muttered. I lifted the white mug to my lips, pretending to drink. The coffee was normal. Just coffee. My suspicions were confirmed. The poison was only in 1 cup. Mine. For 35 minutes, nothing happened. Trevor got dressed. Patricia cleaned the kitchen, humming that same tune. I sat at the table, trying to breathe normally, waiting. Then Trevor's face went pale. He grabbed the counter. "I don't feel right," he said. Patricia's head snapped up. Her eyes met mine. In that split second, I saw everything, the calculation, the fear, the realization that her plan had gone horribly wrong. Then Trevor collapsed, and my entire world exploded. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. I sat in a plastic chair while 2 police officers stood over me, asking questions I could barely process. Patricia sat across from us, crying into a tissue, playing the devastated mother perfectly. Every few seconds, she'd look at me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, you need to answer the question," the older officer said. "Did you make the coffee this morning?" "No. Patricia made it. She." "That's a lie." Patricia's voice cracked with false emotion. "I saw her in the kitchen. She insisted on making Trevor's coffee. Said she wanted to do something nice for him for once." The younger officer wrote something in his notebook. I watched his pen move and felt the walls closing in. This was how it would go. Her word against mine. The devoted mother versus the problematic wife. Everyone knew Trevor and I fought. Everyone knew I'd called the police twice last year when he'd gotten physical. Everyone knew our marriage was falling apart. What they didn't know was why. 3 years ago, Trevor was different. Or maybe I just wanted him to be different. We met at a coffee shop, ironic, considering how this story ends, and he was charming. Funny. Attentive. He brought me flowers every Friday. Called just to hear my voice. Made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. The first time he grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise, he cried afterward. Said his father used to hit his mother and he'd promised himself he'd never be that man. He begged me to forgive him. So I did. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You forgive them. You believe they can change. Except Trevor didn't change. He got worse. The bruises moved to places people couldn't see. The insults became daily background noise. And when I finally worked up the courage to leave, Patricia moved in. Your problem is you don't understand men, Patricia told me one night while Trevor was at the bar. My son needs a strong woman, not some weak little girl who cries at every harsh word. If you can't handle him, plenty of other women can. That's when I understood. Patricia didn't move in because of mold. She moved in to make sure I couldn't escape. To make sure Trevor always had someone on his side. To make sure I was outnumbered in my own home. A doctor emerged from the emergency room, his face grim. Are you Trevor Hayes' family? Patricia jumped up. I'm his mother. How is my baby? We've stabilized him, but he's critical. We found high levels of cyanide in his system. Another 30 minutes and, he paused. Someone tried to kill him. The police need to know who had access to the coffee. All eyes turned to me. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but what came out was laughter. Horrible, broken laughter that made everyone step back like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Because in that moment, I realized the terrible truth. Even if I told them Patricia did it, even if I explained about the switched cups, I'd still look guilty. I'd still look like the angry wife who finally snapped. She's insane, Patricia whispered to the officers. Look at her. She's laughing while my son fights for his life. The older officer pulled out handcuffs. The holding cell was smaller than my closet. Gray walls. Gray floor. A metal toilet in the corner that smelled like every bad decision that had ever been made in that 6x8 space. I sat on the thin mattress and tried to figure out how my life had become a crime show episode. My lawyer, Bridget Wu, showed up 4 hours later. She was short, sharp-eyed, and looked like she could argue with God and win. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. And I mean everything. Don't leave out details because you think they make you look bad. I can't help you if I don't know the truth. So I told her. About Trevor's abuse. About Patricia's hatred. About the bitter almond smell and the switched cups. About 3 years of slowly drowning in a marriage that was killing me piece by piece. Bridget didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back and studied me. Here's the problem. You switched the cups. That's going to look premeditated to a jury. Like you knew there was poison and deliberately gave it to your husband. But I didn't poison him. I just didn't want to die. I believe you. But belief doesn't win cases. Evidence does. She tapped her pen against the pad. Did Patricia buy anything unusual recently? Chemicals? Cleaning supplies? I thought back to 2 weeks ago. She went to some specialty cooking store. Said she was making almond extract from scratch for Christmas cookies. I thought it was weird because she hates baking. Bridget's eyes lit up. Bitter almonds. You can buy them at specialty stores, and if you know what you're doing, you can extract cyanide from the pits. It's old school, but it works. She stood up. I'm going to get a warrant for her purchase history. Meanwhile, you sit tight and don't talk to anyone. Not the guards, not other inmates, nobody. If you're watching this and thinking I should have left Trevor years ago, you're right. I should have. But leaving isn't as simple as packing a bag and walking out the door. Where do you go when you've been isolated from friends and family for years? How do you afford rent when your husband controls the bank account? How do you stay safe when he's promised to hunt you down if you ever try to leave? The system isn't built for women like me. It's built for women who have money, family, options. I had none of those things. So I stayed. And I survived. Until the day Patricia decided surviving wasn't enough, she wanted me gone permanently. 2 days later, Bridget came back grinning. Got her. Patricia bought 2 pounds of bitter almonds 3 weeks ago. Paid cash, but the store has security footage. She also Googled how much cyanide is lethal and untraceable poisons on her laptop. The woman's not as smart as she thinks. Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in months. So they'll arrest her? They already did. An hour ago. Bridget's grin faded. But here's the thing. She's claiming you asked her to buy the almonds. Says you wanted to make homemade cookies and she was just helping out. She's saying you poisoned your own coffee to frame her, then switched cups at the last second to make it look like she did it. The hope died. That's insane. That's reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt is all a defense needs. Bridget sat down across from me. There's one person who can clear this up. Trevor. If he wakes up and tells the truth about what he saw, you walk free. If he backs his mother's story. He'll back her story. He always backs her story. Then we better pray the evidence speaks louder than his lies. Trevor woke up on day 5. I wasn't there, I was still in jail, but Bridget called me immediately after the police interviewed him. He says he doesn't remember anything about the morning. Claims the last thing he recalls is going to bed the night before. That's convenient. Extremely. Bridget's voice was tight. But here's the interesting part. The detective noticed Trevor seemed scared. Not of you. Of his mother. When they asked if Patricia could have made the coffee, he got quiet. Really quiet. Then said he needed to speak with his lawyer. Something shifted in my chest. What does that mean? It means maybe, just maybe, your husband isn't as loyal to mommy as she thinks. They released me on bail 2 days later. A judge decided I wasn't a flight risk, probably because I had nowhere to fly to. I went to a women's shelter because I sure as hell wasn't going back to the house. The shelter was crowded, loud, and smelled like industrial soap. It was also the safest I'd felt in years. Bridget visited me there with news. Patricia's lawyer made a mistake. They're claiming she bought the almonds for baking, right? Well, turns out Patricia told 3 different people she hates almond flavoring. Says it reminds her of funerals. One of those people is her sister, who's willing to testify. So she's lying. So she's lying. And juries hate liars. Bridget pulled out a folder. There's more. We subpoenaed Trevor's medical records. This isn't his first trip to the ER. He was admitted 8 months ago with suspected poisoning. Doctors thought it was food poisoning at the time, but looking back at his symptoms, nausea, dizziness, confusion, it matches low-level cyanide exposure. My blood went cold. She tried before. Looks like it. And guess who was living with you 8 months ago? Patricia moved in 9 months ago. Exactly. She's been planning this for a while. Question is, was she trying to kill Trevor then, or you? I thought back to 8 months ago. Trevor had gotten sick right after I'd made dinner. Patricia had thrown the leftovers away before I could save them, saying she didn't want the food to spoil. At the time, I thought she was being helpful. Now I realized she was destroying evidence. She was testing dosages. Figuring out how much she needed. That's my theory too. And if we can prove it, Patricia goes away for a long time. The shelter door opened and a woman walked in, someone I hadn't seen in 2 years. Natalie. My best friend from college. The friend Trevor had convinced me to stop talking to because she didn't understand our relationship. Oh my God, Natalie said, crossing the room in 3 strides and pulling me into a hug. I saw the news. I've been looking everywhere for you. I broke down crying in her arms. All the fear, all the stress, all the years of holding myself together just came pouring out. When I finally stopped, Natalie held my face in her hands and looked me dead in the eye. You're not going back to him. I don't care what happens with the trial. You're not going back. I know. Do you? Because I remember you saying that before. She was right. I'd said it before. After the first bruise. After the first hospital visit. After the police came. But this time was different. This time I tasted death in a coffee cup and made the choice to live. That choice had consequences I'd have to face, but I'd made it. And I'd make it again. We have a court date in 2 weeks, Bridget said. The prosecutor is charging Patricia with attempted murder. They're also investigating the incident from 8 months ago. If Trevor testifies against her, she's done. If he protects her, then I'm done. Bridget didn't argue. We both knew the truth. Everything depended on Trevor deciding which woman he loved more, his wife or his mother. And based on 3 years of marriage, I knew exactly which way he'd lean. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches filled with strangers who'd come to watch my life fall apart like it was entertainment. Patricia sat at the defense table in a grey dress that made her look like someone's sweet grandmother. She'd even worn a cross necklace. The jury ate it up. My lawyer asked if I was enjoying the story so far, and honestly, I'm not sure enjoying is the right word for watching your life become a true crime special. But if you're still here, hit that like button and subscribe. I promise this story gets even crazier. The prosecutor was a bulldog named Marcus Chun. He laid out the case methodically. The bitter almonds purchased 3 weeks before. The Google searches on Patricia's laptop. The testimony from Patricia's sister about her hatred of almond flavoring. The medical records from Trevor's previous hospital visit. Piece by piece, he built a wall of evidence that should have been impossible to climb. Then Patricia's lawyer stood up. His name was Gerald something, and he wore expensive suits that screamed, "I get guilty people acquitted for a living." He was good. Really good. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gerald said, pacing in front of the jury, "the prosecution wants you to believe that a loving mother tried to murder her own son. Does that make sense to anyone? Why would Patricia Hayes poison Trevor? She has no motive. No life insurance policy on him. No inheritance to gain. Nothing." He turned to point at me. "But this woman? She has plenty of motive. A failing marriage. A history of police calls for domestic disturbance. Witnesses who heard her threaten to leave him. And most damning of all, she's the one who switched the cups. She admits it herself." My stomach dropped. He was twisting everything. Making my survival look like murder. The prosecution claims Patricia Googled untraceable poisons. But look at the dates. Those searches happened after Patricia discovered her daughter-in-law was researching ways to kill someone. Patricia was investigating what her son's wife was planning. She bought the bitter almonds because she was trying to figure out if that's what her daughter-in-law was going to use. She was trying to protect her son, not kill him. It was brilliant. Horrible, but brilliant. Gerald had taken every piece of evidence against Patricia and flipped it into evidence against me. The jury was nodding along. I could see it in their faces, doubt creeping in like poison in a coffee cup. Then Marcus called his key witness. The prosecution calls Trevor Hayes. The courtroom went silent. Trevor walked in wearing a suit I'd never seen before, probably something Patricia bought him. He looked thinner, older. The near-death experience had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. He didn't look at me as he was sworn in. Didn't look at his mother either. He just stared straight ahead like he was trying to disappear. "Mr. Hayes," Marcus began gently, "can you tell us what you remember from the morning of November 3rd? Trevor's voice was barely a whisper. "I remember waking up, getting dressed, going to the kitchen." And what happened in the kitchen? This was it. The moment everything hung on. Trevor could tell the truth about his mother making the coffee. About the switch he might have seen from the corner of his eye. About 3 years of abuse that led to this moment. Or he could lie and watch me go to prison for trying to survive. Trevor's hands gripped the witness stand. His knuckles went white. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "My mother made the coffee. She made 2 cups. One for me, one for my wife. I saw her put something extra in one of the cups while she thought no one was watching." The courtroom erupted. Patricia shot to her feet, screaming. Gerald tried to call for a recess. The judge banged his gavel. And I just sat there frozen, watching my husband finally, tell the truth. But Trevor wasn't done. I saw my wife switch the cups. And I knew why. Because I'd seen my mother do things before. Small things. My wife's medicine going missing. Her car brakes being loose. Her allergy medication being replaced with something else. I never said anything because his voice broke completely. Because I was a coward. Because I chose my mother over my wife every single time. And I almost killed her because of it. That's when Patricia lunged across the courtroom, screaming that Trevor was lying, that I'd poisoned him against her, that she'd only ever loved him. Security guards grabbed her. She fought like a wild animal, screeching about betrayal and ungrateful sons. It took 3 guards to drag her out of the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes. When they came back, the forewoman stood and said 2 words that changed my life: not guilty. I walked out of that courtroom a free woman, while Patricia went back to jail to await her own trial for attempted murder. But freedom felt strange. Like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit anymore. Because even though I'd been found innocent, I wasn't the same person who'd switched those cups. That woman was gone. And I wasn't sure yet who was left in her place. Trevor filed for divorce 3 days after the trial ended. I was staying at Natalie's apartment, sleeping on her couch and trying to remember what normal felt like, when the papers arrived. A process server handed them to me with an apologetic smile, like he knew he was delivering the final nail in my coffin. Except it didn't feel like a nail. It felt like freedom wrapped in legal documents. The papers were simple. No contest divorce. Trevor wanted nothing except to dissolve the marriage and move on. No alimony. No fighting over the house or the car or the wedding china we'd gotten from his aunt. Just a clean break, like cutting out a tumor. Natalie read over my shoulder. He's not asking for anything? That's suspicious. Maybe he feels guilty. Men like Trevor don't feel guilty. They feel inconvenienced. She tapped the signature line. Sign it before he changes his mind. I signed. My hand shook so badly, the signature looked like it belonged to a different person. Maybe it did. The woman who married Trevor wouldn't recognize the woman holding this pen. 2 weeks later, I went back to the house to get my things. Trevor had moved out, gone to stay with some cousin in Michigan. The house felt different without him, lighter, like someone had opened all the windows and let fresh air blow through years of stale arguments and broken promises. I packed quickly, throwing clothes and books into garbage bags. I didn't want furniture or pictures or anything that would remind me of this place. In the back of my closet, I found a box I didn't remember packing. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me, all from my mother who'd died when I was 23. Letters Trevor said had never arrived. Letters he'd hidden from me for 3 years because they were full of warnings about him, about red flags she'd seen at our wedding, about her concerns that I was making a terrible mistake. I sat on the closet floor and read every single one. My mother had known. She tried to tell me. And Trevor had made sure I never heard her voice warning me to run. That night, Natalie found me crying in her bathroom. What happened? I showed her the letters. She read them silently, her face getting harder with each page. When she finished, she said, "You know what this means, right? He isolated you on purpose. Cut you off from everyone who loved you so you'd have nobody to turn to." I know. Good. Because I need you to remember that when you start feeling guilty for what happened, you didn't almost kill him. You survived him. Those words became my anchor in the months that followed. Because guilt is a funny thing. It doesn't care about truth. It just burrows into your brain and whispers that maybe you could have done things differently. Maybe if you'd been stronger, smarter, better, you wouldn't have ended up switching coffee cups with a man who was supposed to love you. Patricia's trial started in February. I had to testify. Had to sit in that witness box and explain about the bitter almond smell and the switched cups while Patricia stared at me like she could set me on fire with her eyes alone. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a liar, a manipulator, a woman who'd poisoned her own marriage and then blamed it on an innocent mother-in-law. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bitter almonds. The searches. Trevor's testimony. The medical records from his previous poisoning. The jury took 2 hours to find her guilty of attempted murder. The judge gave her 15 years. As they led her out of the courtroom, Patricia turned to me one last time. "You destroyed my family," she hissed. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No. You did." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I moved into my own apartment. It was small, Just a one-bedroom in a building that had seen better days, but it was mine. Nobody screaming. Nobody criticizing. Nobody making me feel like I was constantly walking on eggshells made of broken glass. Natalie helped me move in. We painted the living room a soft blue that reminded me of the sky before a storm. Hung up curtains I picked out myself. Bought a couch from a thrift store that was ugly but comfortable. Every choice was mine. Every decision belonged to me. It felt strange and terrifying and absolutely perfect. I started therapy. A woman named Dr. Reeves who specialized in trauma and domestic violence. She had gray hair and kind eyes and never once made me feel crazy for staying as long as I did. Our sessions were hard. Sometimes I'd leave her office and sit in my car crying for 20 minutes before I could drive home. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, I started feeling like a person again instead of a ghost haunting my own life. You keep saying you should have left earlier, Dr. Reeves said during one session. But you left when you could. That's what matters. I almost died first. But you didn't. You made a split-second decision that saved your life. That takes courage most people don't have. I didn't feel courageous. I felt lucky. Lucky that my brain worked fast enough to recognize the smell. Lucky that Trevor drank without looking. Lucky that the truth came out before I went to prison. But maybe Dr. Reeves was right. Maybe survival was its own kind of courage. I got a job at a bookstore near my apartment. Minimum wage, nothing glamorous, but I loved it. Loved the smell of paper and ink. Loved helping people find stories that might change their lives the way books had changed mine during the darkest years. My co-workers were kind. They didn't know about my past, and I didn't tell them. I was just Jenny who worked the register and gave good recommendations. One day, a woman came in looking scared. She had a bruise on her wrist she kept trying to hide with her sleeve. She asked me if we had any books about starting over. I took her to the self-help section, but before she left, I slipped her a card for the women's shelter that had saved me. Just in case, I said quietly. She looked at the card, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears. How did you know? Because I've been where you are. And I want you to know it's possible to get out. It's hard. It's terrifying. But it's possible. She left without buying anything, but she took the card. 2 months later, she came back. Different clothes. Different haircut. Different light in her eyes. She bought 3 books about new beginnings and thanked me for the card. Said it saved her life. That's when I realized my story wasn't just about surviving. It was about helping others survive too. I reconnected with old friends Trevor had driven away. Started going to support groups for domestic violence survivors. Began volunteering at the shelter that had taken me in. Every person I met had a different story, but we all shared the same scars. The same guilt. The same question, why didn't I leave sooner? The answer was always the same. Because leaving is complicated. Because love and fear get tangled up until you can't tell them apart. Because the person hurting you is also the person who sometimes holds you when you cry. Because society tells you to make it work, to try harder, to be patient. Because you're ashamed and scared and broke and don't know where else to go. But also because you're human. And humans are wired to hope things will get better. Even when all evidence points to the opposite. Trevor never reached out. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Michigan permanently. Started therapy of his own. His cousin told someone who told someone else that he was trying to understand why he'd become his father, the man he'd sworn he'd never be. I hoped therapy helped him. I really did. Not for his sake, but for the sake of whoever he might date next. As for me, I learned to sleep without nightmares. Learned to drink coffee without checking for bitter almond smells. Learned that healing isn't linear. Some days you feel strong, and some days you fall apart in the grocery store because a man raises his voice 3 aisles over. But you keep going. You keep building a life that's yours. A year after everything happened, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name and apartment number in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 sentences. I saw your interview on the news. Thank you for telling your story. I left my husband last week because of it. You saved my life. I'd done an interview with a local news station about domestic violence awareness. Talked about warning signs and resources and why it's so hard to leave. The reporter asked if I regretted switching the cups, and I said no. Because if I hadn't, I'd be dead. And dead women can't warn other women about the danger they're in. The interview went viral. Suddenly, I was getting messages from strangers all over the country. Women thanking me, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. Some of them made me cry. Some of them made me angry at a world that fails women so consistently. All of them reminded me why I'd survived, so I could help others do the same. But not everyone was supportive. I got hate mail too. People calling me a liar. Saying I'd manipulated Trevor and Patricia. Claiming I'd planned the whole thing to get away with attempted murder. The internet is full of people who believe women are always lying, even when the evidence is overwhelming. I learned to ignore them. Learned that my truth didn't need their validation. The women I'd helped, the lives I'd changed, that was what mattered. Not some stranger behind a keyboard who thought they knew my story better than I did. Natalie threw me a 1-year of freedom party. Just a few close friends, pizza, and cheap wine. We sat on my apartment floor and talked about everything except the trial. About jobs and hobbies and plans for the future. Normal things. Boring things. Beautiful things. I'm proud of you, Natalie said when everyone else had left. You know that, right? For what? Surviving. For thriving. You could have let this break you. Instead, you're out here helping other people. That's not just survival. That's heroism. I didn't feel like a hero. Heroes are people who save others. I just saved myself. But maybe that was enough. Maybe choosing yourself when everyone else wants you to disappear is its own kind of heroic. Trevor's mother got denied parole at her first hearing. The judge said she showed no remorse for her actions. She'd spent the entire hearing claiming she was the real victim, that Trevor and I had conspired against her. That she'd only ever wanted what was best for her son. The judge didn't buy it. 15 years with no early release. Part of me felt satisfaction. Part of me just felt sad. Patricia had so much hate inside her that she tried to commit murder. And for what? To keep her son under her control? To punish me for not being the doormat she wanted? Whatever her reasons, they'd cost her everything. And maybe that was justice. Or maybe it was just tragedy all around. I thought about visiting her in prison. Asking her why she'd done it. What she'd hoped to accomplish. But Dr. Reeves talked me out of it. Some questions don't have answers that will satisfy you, she said. And some people aren't capable of giving you closure. You have to make your own. So I did. I wrote Patricia a letter I never sent. Told her everything I'd wanted to say in court but couldn't. How her hatred had almost killed me. How her son had deserved better than her poison. How I forgave her not because she deserved forgiveness, but because carrying hate was exhausting and I was done being exhausted. Then I burned the letter in my kitchen sink and watched the ashes wash down the drain. That was my closure. My goodbye to a woman who'd tried to erase me. She'd failed. I was still here. Still breathing. Still building a life she'd never be part of. 2 years after the trial, I went back to school. Got my degree in social work so I could professionally help women leaving dangerous situations. It was hard balancing classes with work and volunteering, but I managed. Because I'd survived Patricia and Trevor. School was nothing compared to that. I met someone. His name was Marcus, not the prosecutor, different Marcus, and he was kind. Patient. Didn't push me when I needed space. Didn't get angry when I had nightmares. He'd lost his sister to domestic violence 10 years earlier, so he understood in ways most people couldn't. We took things slow. Maybe slower than normal. But slow felt safe, and safe felt like a gift I didn't deserve but was learning to accept. The first time Marcus raised his voice, not at me, just on the phone with customer service, I froze. Every muscle in my body locked up. My brain screamed at me to run. He noticed immediately. Hung up the phone. Sat down on the floor so he wouldn't tower over me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to scare you. Do you want me to leave? That's how I knew he was different. Trevor would have gotten angry at me for being scared. Would have said I was overreacting. Would have made it my fault somehow. Marcus just apologized and gave me space to feel what I needed to feel. We talked for 2 hours that night. About my past. About his sister. About trauma and healing and why some scars never fully fade. He held my hand and said, "I'm not him. I'm never going to be him. But I understand if you need to protect yourself. Your safety matters more than my feelings." I cried. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. Because someone finally understood that my fear wasn't irrational. It was earned. And they respected it instead of trying to fix it. I graduated with my social work degree on a sunny Tuesday in May. Natalie was there. Marcus was there. A few women from the support group came. My mother wasn't there, she'd been gone for years, but I felt her presence anyway. Felt her pride in the life I'd built from the ashes of the one that almost killed me. I got a job at a non-profit helping domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system. It was emotionally draining work. Every woman I helped reminded me of myself 2 years ago, scared, trapped, desperate. But I also got to see them transform. Got to watch them leave dangerous situations and build new lives. Got to be the person I'd needed when I was drowning. One afternoon, a woman came into my office. She had a black eye and a restraining order that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. Her husband kept violating it, and the police weren't helping. She looked at me with empty eyes and said, "I don't know how much more I can take." I knew that look. I'd worn it myself. So I told her my story. About the coffee and the bitter almonds and the switched cups. About the trial and the divorce and the 2 years of rebuilding that followed. And I ended with this: "You're stronger than you know. And you deserve a life where you're not constantly afraid. Let me help you find it." She cried. I cried. We made a safety plan together. 2 months later, she left her husband. Last I heard, she'd moved to a different state and started over. She sends me a Christmas card every year with photos of her kids smiling in ways they never smiled before. That's what kept me going. Knowing that my worst day had become a roadmap for someone else's escape. 5 years have passed since I switched those coffee cups. 5 years since I made a split-second decision that saved my life and changed everything. People ask if I regret it. The answer is no. I regret marrying Trevor. I regret ignoring the red flags. I regret staying as long as I did. But I don't regret surviving. Patricia is still in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 10 more years, and honestly, I hope they never let her out. Not because I hate her, I don't, not anymore, but because she's dangerous. The kind of dangerous that hides behind a sweet smile and a mother's love. The kind of dangerous that puts poison in coffee cups and calls it protecting her family. Trevor and I never spoke again after the divorce. I heard he got remarried. I hope he treats his new wife better than he treated me. I hope therapy worked for him. I hope he broke the cycle his father started and Patricia continued. But his healing isn't my responsibility anymore. Mine is. I married Marcus last fall. Small ceremony, just close friends. No drama. No toxic family members. Just 2 people who'd survived their own hells and decided to build something soft together. We have a rule: no yelling, no ultimatums, no playing games with each other's trust. Communication or nothing. It's the healthiest relationship I've ever had, and sometimes I still can't believe it's real. I run a support group now for women leaving abusive relationships. We meet every Tuesday night in the community center. Sometimes 2 women show up. Sometimes 20. We drink tea, never coffee, I can't stomach it anymore, and share our stories. Our fears. Our victories. Our setbacks. Nobody judges. Nobody tells you what you should have done differently. We just hold space for each other's pain and celebrate each other's progress. Last week, a woman came to group for the first time. She was so nervous she could barely speak. At the end, she pulled me aside and said, "Do you really think I can leave? Do you think I'll be okay?" I thought about myself 5 years ago. Terrified. Trapped. Certain I'd die in that house one way or another. And I thought about who I am now. Free. Healing. Helping others find their own freedom. Yes, I told her. It's going to be hard. The hardest thing you've ever done. There will be days you want to go back because the unknown feels scarier than the abuse you know. But on the other side of that fear is a life where you get to choose. Where you're not constantly walking on eggshells. where you can breathe without wondering if today's the day it gets worse. And that life is worth fighting for. She hugged me and cried. Said she'd come back next week. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. Maybe she'll leave her partner tomorrow, or maybe it'll take 5 more years. Everyone's timeline is different. But at least now she knows it's possible. At least now she has a roadmap. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like I was, please know this: you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Your fear is valid. And there are people who will help you. Hotlines, shelters, organizations. People like me who've been where you are and made it out. You don't have to stay. You don't have to shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a life that's yours. And if you're watching this and you've never been in an abusive relationship, pay attention to the people around you. Look for the signs. The isolation. The excuses. The fear in their eyes when they talk about their partner. Believe them when they tell you something's wrong. Don't judge them for staying. Just let them know you're there when they're ready to leave. My story started with a cup of coffee that smelled like bitter almonds. It could have ended with my funeral. Instead, it ended with me sitting in a community center every Tuesday night, helping other women write their own survival stories. That's the life lesson here. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you becomes the thing that defines your purpose. I almost drank poison that day. Instead, I swallowed my fear and walked away from what was really killing me. And I've been breathing easier ever since. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share stories of survival, strength, and second chances. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. We read every comment, and your story matters. Together, we can inspire others to choose themselves. To choose life. To choose freedom. See you in the next story.